Haribo, Namaste, Aloha. My name is Janapati Das. Thank you for joining my Bhagavad Gita class. We are reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, translated and purported upon by my spiritual grandfather, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is the 1972 edition, which is the recommended, Gaudiya Vaishnava recommended edition to read from. And I'd like to offer my respects to you. Thank you for tuning in. I would also like to offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, Jagat Guru, Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, and pray for his mercy upon me in being able to adequately and efficiently translating and transmitting this message of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Yes, so let's engage in some meditation. The hearing and repeating of Krishna's names, Kirtan, is the prime benediction for humanity at large. And so please join along. I'm going to try something. New song. Make sure I'm not buzzing. Okay. Namo Sila Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Kodakaruna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Pristayate Namo Sila Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Kodakaruna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Pristayate Vajishri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vajishri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Haribo Nitai Gaur Nitai Gaur Haribo Nitai Gaur Nitai Gaur Haribo Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Okay, that was a rough draft. Work on that song a little bit. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto them. So, as instructed by my spiritual master in a lecture one time, that during this auspicious time of Balaram's appearance day and Janmashtami of Krishna's appearance day, a week after, followed by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's appearance day, the day after Janmashtami, and of course the week after or 2 weeks after Radhastami with Radha. Very auspicious month. And so my spiritual master has instructed us to engage in more Krishna Katha, hearing the stories, the pastimes of Balaram and Sri Krishna. So I hope that this reading of the Bhagavad Gita will reach you and give you all good auspiciousness because of the grace of my spiritual master. So we have been reading from chapter 2 in the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna has been instructing Arjuna on the nature of the spirit soul. We already explained the fact that we are neither bodies or minds, but we are actually spiritual entities, and that the living entity cannot be broken or killed or any way. And also instructing the contemplating the objects of the senses. That's what we were reading recently, I think last time. The difference between focusing our duty and focusing our mind upon Krishna, focusing our senses in Krishna's service, and focusing it for our own pleasure, and how that path goes. If we take one path, contemplating the objects of the senses for our own pleasure, that has a certain outcome, and we've read about that attachment happens and a lust is developed, the mode of passion, and from the lust comes anger, and from the anger comes delusion and bewilderment of memory, and one eventually falls down again into the material, is reincarnated. So, but we can take the road of contemplating, using our senses in the service of Krishna, doing our duty in the service of Krishna, which has an attachment also. It also has an attachment, makes it a very, very nice attachment, which is a normal attachment, our original attachment of love, and instead of lust. When we're contemplating the objects of our senses, we develop lust, but when we contemplate the object of our senses through Krishna, we are developing love, true love, real love. A lot of people talk about love. Love is a very popular thing. I love you, or falling in love, or falling out of love, But there's really only one kind of love, and that comes ultimately from Krishna. We can love our brothers and our neighbors as ourselves, like Jesus instructed, but we can't really do that very efficiently without loving God first. So that is a true love. If we, what does it say? First commandment is to love God with our whole heart, our whole mind, our whole being, everything that we have. And like unto it, the second commandment is to love our neighbor as ourselves. So there's a reason why we love our neighbor as ourselves. There's the second commandment of Lord Jesus Christ, because what we pass off as love in this material world is not really love. It's actually lust. And it's a conditional type of love, so-called love. It's conditional. In other words, we expect something in return. If we don't get something in return from it, we get angry, as is stated in here, when we contemplate the objects of the senses and the lust develops. And from lust, anger arises because we are not getting what we put into it. But unconditional love, which is what Krishna and the spiritual master has, despite how we feel about Krishna and our spiritual master, they love us unconditionally. They don't mind or whatever if you're hating them or whatever. So this unconditional love can be spread to everyone, but only through the process of loving the Lord with all our heart, our own minds, and our beings. So we had continued. We're leaving off, right? We were talking about practicing the regulated principles of freedom and transcending the attachment and aversion. And we talked about the really wonderful wordplay of regulated principles of freedom, the true freedom that we do. Usually you think about freedom as being anything goes, you know. It's kind of funny because I was contemplating this. There is this movement in it's kind of been going on. It was started by a gentleman named Anton LaVey, and he started a church called the Church of Satan. And, you know, it's more like, you know, people have visions of like what that might mean, you know, but it was mostly just a humanist kind of movement. And I think that Anton LaVey realized at his deathbed that it was a big mistake. But it is kind of a true Satanism in its sense, because the philosophy was anything, you know, anything goes. Whatever you want to do, you should do. If you don't like somebody and you want to hit them, you should hit them. You should never withhold or regulate or anything. So in a sense, this is what we're talking about, even though I don't think in the surface there was really, you know, people walking around with horns, and that was probably just, if they did that, it was just like a jokey kind of thing. But the philosophy at its core, this sort of like hedonistic lifestyle, which is really Satanism, it's creating great suffering. We talked about why not following the regulated principles of freedom, why following your own mind and everything causes so much distress, anguish, pain, and problems in the world. It's such a selfish movement. So, continuing on here, text 65. Prasade sharva dukhanam hanir asho pajayate prasana chetasho hiyashu buddhi parayavashtitate. Prasade, on achievement of the causeless mercy of the Lord. So you notice that word prasad is the mercy of Krishna, and we recognize that word from the word prasadam, which is the offering when we offer material items to Krishna, like, you know, food. That's the most obvious thing. Fruit, flower, leaf. You know, there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, you know, just offer me a fruit. One can offer me a fruit, flower, or a little water. And we'll get to that verse a little bit later in the Bhagavad Gita. This is a prasadam. It is the mercy of Krishna. So we had talked about when you need to give people Krishna and they don't want to hear the philosophy, they don't want to even hear maybe the chanting of Krishna's names, you can give them food. And this is the prasadam it's the mercy of Krishna. And this is the unconditional love of Krishna, that he always gives an opportunity for the devotee of Krishna, the living entity, to come back to Krishna, to turn around like those two birds on the branch in the Svetasvatara Upanishad, one waiting for the spirit, the Paramatma waiting for the Jivatma to turn around and face him again, saying, I'm waiting for you, you know. I'm not going to force you, but I will give you opportunities and, you know, give you these, you know, little trickster sort of things, like giving you prasadam and whatnot. But that's also a very interesting thing too, because there have been times where even people who are so far gone or demoniac you try to give them prasadam, they don't want even, they just are like, they can sense it, you know. They can sense what it is. It's interesting, and so they stay away from it. So that does happen, unfortunately. Sarva, all dukhananam, material miseries, hani, destruction, asya, his, upajayate, takes place, prasade chetashaha, of the happy-minded. He, certainly, ashu, very soon, buddhi, intelligence, pari, sufficiently, avishtate, avashtate, established, get that word right. For one who is so situated in the divine consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer in such a happy state. One's intelligence soon becomes steady. Nice. Text 66. Nasti buddhir ayuktasya na kacha chayuktasya bhavana na chaba vayataha shantir ashantasya kutaha shukam na ashti. There cannot be buddhi, transcendental intelligence, ayuktasya, of one who is not connected with Krishna consciousness. Neither, cha, and avyuktasya, one devoid of Krishna consciousness. Bhavana, mind fixed in happiness. Neither, cha, and abhavayataha, one who is not fixed. Shanti, peace. Om shanti, 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 right? You've heard that. Ashantasha, of the unpeaceful. Kutaha, where there is. Shukam, happiness. So very interesting words, of course. Ayuk, meaning, we read that yuktaha, right, which means to connect things, which comes from yoga. Ayuk, when you put a in front, it negates the word, so it's not connected. So this one is, of course, one who's not connected with Krishna consciousness. Translation of text 66, another wonderful verse. One who is not in transcendental consciousness can have neither a controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? It's a great verse. I'll read it again because I love this verse. It's one of my favorite verses. One who is not in transcendental consciousness can have neither a controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Since time immemorial, humans have been trying to achieve peace, and they create the United Nations and the League of Nations, and they have all these kinds of different meetings and attempts and peace marches and all these things to try to have peace, and yet we continuously have war, we continuously have conflicts, and this all stems not because humans really want to create war. As living entities, we're very peaceful. We're peaceful in our relationship with Krishna, and in that a relationship that we have in yoga with Krishna. But of being ayukta, we are not connected to Krishna, right? Ayukta tasha. We're not connected in Krishna consciousness. We are instead connected to the engagement of our mind and our senses in the attempt to try to find our relationship with Krishna, unbeknownst to us, right? We think that we're actually trying to find happiness, but we don't think, oh, that's because we need to be yuktaha, we need to be connected to Krishna. No, we just need to try to manipulate the material world through our senses. We try to get all, like those little octopuses, or, they're like, trying to suck different kinds of happiness from matter. And so one who is not in that transcendental consciousness, who's in the material consciousness, their mind is not controlled, because their mind is continually trying to find that happiness, and it's not getting it. It's getting frustrated, as we said before, contemplating the objects of our senses, getting lust, getting angry, being delusional, bewildered of the mind, and so on and so on. And we don't have any kind of real steady intelligence because our intelligence is all over the place because we're just like floundering in this material world, unhappy, dying spiritually. So without all this, we cannot have peace of heart. We cannot have peace of mind. And collectively, as a society, we cannot have peace. We cannot have peace of mind at all. We're constantly in this throe of material nature. And so therefore we are not happy. We're not happy. Yet we're continuously told, if we do A, B, C, D, and E, we will find true happiness. We will be in the pursuit of happiness. And we may get some little pleasures here and there, but we get no satisfaction, as the Rolling Stones sing, I ain't got no satisfaction, right? And the song, I've tried and I tried, but I just can't get no satisfaction, right? So this is really true. That's a very significant sort of statement. I don't think they really do anything. They didn't do anything about it, but that's a pretty good statement. So, purport. Unless one is in Krishna consciousness, there is no possibility of peace. That's the summary right there. If anyone's like, well, what do we do? What do we do about it? This goes back to the answer for everything is Krishna. It's a question too. Krishna. What do we do about our conflicts in this world? Krishna. How do we solve the problems in my family? Krishna. How do we deal with racism? Krishna. Krishna is always the answer. And with Krishna, there is true peace. True peace. Not just this sort of artificial attempt to manipulate laws or force people to do certain things and just somehow they're all going to be okay with that peacefully. No, Krishna. So it is confirmed in the 5th chapter 5, verse 29, that when one understands that Krishna is the only enjoyer of all the good results of sacrifice and penance, and that he is the proprietor of all universal manifestations, that he is the real friend of all living entities, then only can one have real peace. So another name of Krishna is Yajna. Yajna means a sacrifice. And Krishna is the source of all sacrifices, even the very karmakanda sacrifices, fire sacrifices. We've gone back through that all these varnashram system rules and regulations the sacrifices were meant to regulate. They were regulated principles of freedom in themselves too, because they were ultimately controlling, to a certain degree, the sense enjoyment in the material world for living entities and giving them an opportunity to engage in practices that will elevate their consciousness. We don't really have that anymore. There is no sacrifice. There are sacrifices. There are sacrifices that people do. In fact, they're labeled in the 3 gunas, the modes of tamas, ignorance, the mode of rajas, passion, and mode of sattva, goodness. But we need to ultimately be doing the sacrifice in the shuddha sattva, which is the transcendental mode of goodness. That is, the hearing and chanting of Krishna's names is a transcendental activity. So this is ultimately, but what I was saying is that people do sacrifices. People may go and they, for example, you can go to like places in like Latin America that are heavily Catholic, and they have a modes of passion or ignorance where they flagellate themselves, or they do sacrifices of hanging themselves from a cross because Jesus did that, thinking that if I give this sacrifice for myself, I will obtain merit, right? Or because ultimately people do these sacrifices for different reasons. But the sacrifice we want to do, the highest sacrifice that gives us real peace and real happiness, is the sacrifice of engaging in loving service to Krishna. Bhakti yoga, right? The practices of bhakti yoga. under the direction of the lover of Krishna, our dear Guru Dev. Krishna is the only enjoyer of all the good results of sacrifices and penances, and that he is a proprietor of all universal manifestations, and he is the real friend of all living entities, then only one can have real peace. So the understanding of this, give up all your, religious affiliations and, whatnot, and just surrender to me. Krishna says at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, just surrender to me. I am the source of everything. So, therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. I love that. That's a great line. So people are trying different kinds of things, but they're not peaceful because their mind keeps trying to solve the problems, which is what our mind wants to do. We want to just figure things out. What I think. Krishna was telling this to Arjuna. Arjuna had the bad case of what I think, because as Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada has said many times, and my spiritual master reiterates, is that everyone has an opinion, their own opinion of things, how things are. In fact, somebody I know in my family recently tried to tell me his opinion about what he thought was, that everybody's subjective thoughts, which is an objective statement, really. So, actually. So, everybody was just having their own opinion, except for him. Disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. When one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one with a steady mind bring about peace. So you don't have to search for an answer, a band-aid way to try to fix situations. You just teach people about Krishna. You chant Krishna's names. You give people Krishna. You remind people about who they are and what their purpose is, and how they too can start their walk on the spiritual path back toward Krishna. We could actually live in a very peaceful society. I mean, nothing is perfect in this material world, but we can definitely live in a much more peaceful society if people understood this and acted upon this. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and is without peace, however much one may make a show of peace and spiritual advancement in life. I meet people like this all the time. They're very spiritually, so-called spiritually puffed up. I'm very spiritually elevated, and they've got their own Instagram channels and YouTube, and they do YouTube channels, and they do their readings and their tarot readings, and their yoga things and this and that, and then the next week you see them on doing another TikTok video about the spiritual crisis that they're having. It's like they're just have a breakdown, or this thing goes on all the time. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition which can be achieved only in relationship with Krishna. So it's a relationship with Krishna. This is a great verse, and it is one that we should contemplate upon, especially this purport, when we're thinking about, if we're scrolling on the social media and we're wondering, and everyone is in complete distress about the situation politically or whatever, and they feel like everything is just falling apart. It's Krishna, Krishna, that is the answer to this whole thing. Because, ultimately, many things in life you have very little control over. So, Krishna, that you can have control over, chanting Krishna's names. Text 67. Indriyanam hi chalatam, yanmano nuvid hi yate, tadasya harati prajanam, vayur navam idambashi, indriyanam, of the senses, there's our word again. He, certainly, charlatam, while hurting over, yat, that, manaha, mind, anuvidyate, becomes constantly engaged, tat, that, asya, his, harati, takes away, prajanam, intelligence, vayu, wind, navam, a boat, Eva like ambashi on the water. Translation, text 67. As a boat on the water is swept away by a strong wind, even one of the senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. So, wonderful analogy. So, here, a boat on the water, you know, sometimes you're on the boat and the water is very calm, and then all of a sudden there's just this gust of wind, or like tropical depression comes in, and it's just like the boat, or a hurricane just pushes. You see these boats, they just get. Or my spiritual master has also used the analogy of like being like a little toy boat inside with a bunch of hoses, you know, where the boat is normally strong in the water, but if you put it in a bathtub with no water in it, you're pushing all the senses on this boat, and it's just like the boat flies away out of the bathtub. Unless all the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, even one of them engaged in sense gratification can deviate the devotee from the path of transcendental advancement. As mentioned in the life of Maharaj Ambarisha, all his senses must be engaged. All the senses must be engaged in Krishna consciousness, for that is the correct technique for controlling the mind. So we talked about Ambarisha Maharaj and Durvasha Muni, who got upset with him for whatever, but also in the case that Ambarisha was a pure devotee of Krishna, he engaged everything in the service of Krishna, and we read about that last time. Text 68. Tasmad yashash mahabahu nigriyatani sharvashaha indriyani indriyate bayash tasha prajna prashtitita tasmat. Therefore, Yasha of ones, Mahabaho, O mighty armed one, Nigritani, so curved down, Sarvasha, all around, Indriyani, the senses, Indra Artebiyaha, for the sake of sense objects, Tasha, his, Prajna, intelligence, Pratishtita, fixed. Translation, therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. So there we go again, you know, Krishna reminding the idea of what is steady intelligence, being steady. Purport, as enemies are curbed by a superior force, similarly the senses can be curbed not by any human endeavor. So anybody who tries to say we got to control our senses like a yogi or whatever just by my own power, I got to stop eating that. I got to, you know, it's like, got to stop looking at this. But only by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. One who has understood this, that only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence, and that one should practice this art under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, is called sadhaka, or a suitable candidate for liberation. Very nice. Guided by a spiritual master. And yeah, so this is reiterating what we were talking about. Text 69. Ya nisha sarva bhutananam tasham jagarti shamyami yashash jagrati bhutani shanisha pashato mune. Ya, what? Nisha is night, sarva, all, bhutanam, of living entities, tashyam, in that, jagarti, wakeful, shamyami, the self-controlled, yasham, in which, jagrati, awake, bhutani, all beings, sa, that is, nisha, night, pashyataha, for the introspective, muni, sage, so there's muni, mone, which is from muni, right, like a sage. Some interesting words. I learned jagarti, wakeful, and nisha, night. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is the night for the introspective sage. So we had a similar verse about this earlier, which was, I'm trying to think of whether that was. There was a very similar verse. We'll go back and look at that. saw. There was a similar one. Wasn't the one about winter and summer seasons? Maybe. Okay. Oh, right. So this is one very similar to chapter 2, text 16. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent there is no endurance, and of the existence there is no cessation. The seers have concluded by studying the nature of both. I love how you can connect verses in this. Very nice. So this one, what is the night of for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and what the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. So there are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. So that basically summarizes what this idea is. So what is night? What is the nighttime? What is one way of living for all beings? In other words, this idea of cultivation of self-realization, being introspective, of being spiritually aware, following the path of sadhana bhakti. It's like a time of awakening for those who are controlled. You're like starting to, the day comes up, the sun comes up, you're starting to have realizations. If you're following your spiritual master nicely, you are having realizations, you're having ideas and concepts. You see things for what they really are. This is why it said that the spiritual master comes to you in this cave of ignorance with the torchlight of knowledge to show you, another thing that Srila Prabhupada had said was talking about how Bhaktivedanta was like holding the flashlight and showing people like the scary things that they seem, no, look under there, see, this is what that is, and just showing them with this flashlight, this is the reality of what you're afraid of. Wonderful analogies. So, but and the time of awakening for all beings is a night for the introspective phase. So what is the awakening? What is the vision and the idea of like what is supposed to be happy is being engaged in the material world for most beings. They're like, this is awakening, but you're like, introspective sage is not interested in that darkness. So there are two, let's read this again. There are two classes of intelligent men. The one is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification. The one who sees the awakening in a particular way, right? The awakening of all beings, and the awakening of the introspective sage, right, is the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. This is the focus. I want to know who I am, what the purpose of my life is, what my relationship is with Krishna, what I can do to recultivate my love for Krishna. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for the persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. Though it is kind of a mode of ignorance, really, like being asleep, you're not aware. You're just like, you're in this sort of phantasmagoria of dreams. This is what the reality is. But when you wake up, it's like, oh, this is the reality of things. The introspective sage remains alert in the night of the materialistic men. Material life, right? You're awake, you're alert, you're steady, you're focused, you're engaging through the material world, but not becoming attached to it. The sage feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in his sleeping condition. So you got that in your dreams. Sometimes they're just like nightmares, right? And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, that's really great. I'm eating something really nice, or I'm enjoying, dreaming I'm at a very beautiful place, or whatever. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. So being equilibrium in that seesaw that my spiritual master was talking about, it's not, you don't like shun good things that happen. If they come, they come, but we're not like attached to like, whoa, this is great, I want to keep this forever. And when things are a bummer, we're not like, oh my God, this is terrible. We're just like, okay, that's what's happening. That's my karmic reaction, and this is my karmic reaction. And I'm just getting through this life, and I'm just thinking Krishna, focused on Krishna. He goes on with his self-realization activities undisturbed by material reaction. Nice. Text 70. Apuryamanam achala plashtitam pratishtam shamudram apaha pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarvai sa santim apnoti na kama kami apuryamanam, always filled, achala pratishtam, steadily situated, samudram, the ocean, apaha, water, pravishanti, enter, yadvat, as, tadvat, so, kamaha, desires, yam, unto one, pravishanti, enter, sarve, all, saha, the person, shantim, peace, apnoti, achieves, not, kamakami, one who desires to fulfill desires. One who desires to fulfill desires. Translation, a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flows of desires that can enter like rivers into the ocean which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So this is another beautiful analogy. And we can totally relate to that because our mind is like, like the camera that goes through the different, then there it goes. We watch the river of desires. Sometimes, I've been in these third world countries before where they have these rivers and they've got garbage. So the garbage flows down to slime, and people go to the bathroom and stuff in there, and it's just like floating down, right? That's like our mind. Our mind is constantly providing things, but we don't need to jump in and start fishing out stuff out of our mind, We can just, okay, that's that, whatever, So these things flow into the ocean, and the ocean is stable. Although the rivers all enter into the ocean is undisturbed. It's just still. So similarly, the person who's not disturbed by this because they're one-pointed, focused on their senses and their mind upon Krishna and the service of their spiritual master, they can be peaceful in that. But once you start to jumping on the, all it takes is like, okay, I think I'll jump on that, and then you're like, you're caught up in it's all the things about that. And I think we've all experienced that. We're going along really good, and we just got to hold on to Krishna and Srila Prabhupada's feet. Hold on and just please, because like walking on the razor's edge, you just like go off and you're like, oh, you just like completely get whacked by Maya Devi. So, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires is not enjoying himself, just partaking of this shitty river, that's constantly going in and providing things, because it doesn't solve anything. Like we said before, the mind is always hankering. It's always trying to find a resolution, and it will never find a resolution through the material energy. It will never do it. And so therefore it becomes agitated constantly that it's not being resolved. But we need to focus that on Krishna. And when we focus it on Krishna, that's where we start to experience, this is the resting. This is the ocean. This is where I can enter into this. And it's just wonderful. It just provides me with real satisfaction and happiness. Purport, although the vast ocean is always filled with water, and it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water, but the ocean remains the same, steady. It is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limits of its brink. That is the true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. So it doesn't matter if you're chanting or, it's not like it's going to vanish away and disappear. Those things still come, but we know where our fixation should be. We know where we find our true happiness. So it's like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had said that, every morning I beat my mind with a shoe 100 times, and again at night I beat it with the shoe, or something like that. It's basically because the mind will constantly, what do you think about this? Oh, hey, that's kind of interesting. You have to be like, no, Krishna, The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. And fullness. It's like eating fully from a banquet, feeling satisfied. A Krishna conscious man is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Lord Jesus Christ has said, why just consider the lilies of the field and the birds, and they're I want to learn this whole verse because it's so beautiful. It's like they're adorned in glory. They are provided by their Father. So why would you worry about not being receiving what you need from your Father? Therefore he is like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of the river that flow into the ocean, but he is steady in his activities, and he is not even slightly disturbed for such desires for sense gratification. That is the proof of a Krishna conscious man, Krishna conscious man, one who has not lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desires are present. Because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he can remain steady, like the ocean, and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who fulfill their desires even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. Right? They go through their whole life, and even if they've achieved everything in their life, they have to give it all up at the end of life, or they're just like, they have their high point as a football star, and then they just, it's like they've gone through their football, they can't play football anymore, they're watching the games and thinking about looking at their trophies and, oh, that was great how that was back then, it's like, and then they're just like bitter because at the end they're not doing what they used to do, and they look back on their life and think, what a waste. That is proof of a Krishna conscious, because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is, right, I already read that. He can remain steady like the ocean and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who fulfill desires up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. The fruitive workers, the salvationists, and also the yogis who are after mystic powers are all unhappy because of of unfulfilled desires. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord, and he has no desire to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from the so-called material bondage. The devotee of Krishna is not really interested to go to heaven. Like, people are always Christians are like, are you saved? Jesus will you let Jesus save you? It's like, you want to go to heaven, not go to hell. This sort of like, they just want to elevate this. So they do like this, the bare necessity, or do what they need to do so they can be elevated to be in heaven, in a nice place with their family and their dogs and having the parties and just basically living the extension of what they did in this material life. And it's like, what's your relationship with God? Well, God is just this void that's kind of, or this all one energy that's sort of benedicting people and stuff. But we're not really concerned with them. We just want his keys to his kingdom. So the devotee of Krishna is not really interested. The devotee of Krishna wants Krishna. He wants to serve Krishna. He loves Krishna. He wants to offer whatever situation, whether he's in hellish planets, heavenly planets, wherever, reincarnated, anything, that he can be of service to Krishna. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires, and therefore they are in perfect peace. Perfect peace. Let's see. Okay, we got one more verse. Viyaya, text 71, Kaiman, Yaha Sarvan Pumash Charlati Nirashpaha, Nirmano Nirahan Karaha, Shashantim Adhi Higa Chati. Vidaya, after giving up, Kaman, all material desires for sense gratification. Yaha, the person. Sarvan, all. Puman, a person. Charati, lives. Nirishpalaha, desireless. Nirmamam, mamaha, without a sense of proprietorship. Nirahankaraha, without false ego. Hankara is false ego, right? Interesting. Shaha, all. Shantim, perfect peace. Aji Gachati, attains. Translation, a person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, and who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. So, giving up desires, lives free from these desires, gives up sense of proprietorship, as is said in the Sri Ishopanishad. All things animate and inanimate belong and are owned and controlled by the Lord. And the devotee of Krishna, paraphrasing of course, understands what has been allotted to them in this life. So they understand who is the proprietor. They're borrowing certain things, they're getting loaned things in this world. And it's devoid of false ego. Everything ahankara. Right? So this is great. Purport, to become desireless means not to desire anything for sense gratification. In other words, desire for becoming Krishna consciousness is actually desireless. So this is the same thing as renunciation. We're not actually giving up desires artificially. We are just redirecting our desire to be pleasing to Krishna, to use our senses in. There is a desire there, and there's a desire to be loving and pleasing to Krishna and our spiritual master. So there are desires. They're just purified desires. To understand one's actual position as the eternal servitor of Krishna without falsely claiming this material body to be oneself and without falsely claiming proprietorship over anything in the world is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. Krishna was telling Arjuna that we're not the material body. You're not the material body. You are eternal spirit souls. And you are not the supreme controllers. You need to be in the service of the supreme controller, myself, right? So that was the conclusion of that. Arjuna did not want to fight for his own sense satisfaction, but when he became fully Krishna, did not want to fight for his own sense satisfaction, but when he became fully Krishna consciousness, he fought because Krishna wanted him to fight. For himself, there was no desire to fight, but for Krishna, the same Arjuna fought to his best ability. Desire for the satisfaction of Krishna is really desirelessness. It is not an artificial attempt to abolish desires. Yogis take note, okay? It's not about like some kind of artificial, thing. Like if I do this, A, B, C, D, and E, materially mechanical things, then I will be a yogi, right? No, it's completely different consciousness. The living entity cannot be desireless or senseless because it is active by nature, but he does have to change the quality of his desires, right? So here Bhaktivedanta is saying that we do have desires, but we have to change the quality of our desires. A materially desireless person certainly knows that everything belongs to Krishna. Ishavasham idam sarvam. And therefore he does not falsely claim proprietorship over anything. This transcendental knowledge is based on self-realization, namely knowing perfectly well that every living entity is the eternal part and parcel of Krishna and spiritual identity. And therefore the eternal position of the living entity is never on the level of Krishna or greater than him. Therefore we cannot be the proprietors of anything in this world. And, because we're trying to act like the supreme, imagine this. Billions and trillions and quadrillions of living entities all trying to act as the supreme controller. Of course we're going to have chaos in this. There's only one controller, one supreme lord, and that is Krishna. We are all servants of Krishna, knowingly or unknowingly. We are servants of Krishna. The understanding of Krishna consciousness is the basic principle of real peace. So this is so wonderful. Even just, we're almost, we've got, I think I'll finish this because we got one more text, and then we're going into chapter 3. So I'll read this last text. Text 72. Esha Brahmi stitihi partha nainam prapya vimudyati. Shtitavasham antakalepi namas nirvanam lechati. Esha, this, Brahmi, spiritual, stitihi, situation, partha, osana prita, na, never. Enam, this, prapya, achieving, vimuyati, bewilders. Shtitva, being so situated, asham, being so, ante kale, at the end of life, api, also, Brahma Nirvanam, spiritual kingdom of God, Richati attains. Now, it's very interesting because Brahma Bhuta, there's some Sanskrit words here. We have the word Nirvanam for Nirvanam, which we know in Buddhism is sort of like the merging into the great, the achievement of Nirvanam. But Nirvanam really means it's like a blowing out. It means the cessation of sense desires. And at that point of Nirvanam is when the position of Brahma Bhuta, which is the beginning of real unattached materially spiritual activity. So before, when we're engaging in sadhana bhakti, we're still in the process of having attachments materially that we engage in, and trying to rid ourselves of this by engaging in a practice, sadhana bhakti, the practice, because we don't really want to do it. We want to still enjoy things in the material world. So we're trying to focus ourselves on Krishna by engaging in what the spiritual master instructs us to do. Okay, so so here it says Brahma Nirvanam, spiritual kingdom of God. When the spiritual service of Krishna is the kingdom of God. Okay, no matter where you are geographically, that is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. Not bewildered, right? So we were saying that this talking about like contemplating the objects of the senses and becoming bewildered. We are in a bewildered state in this material world, trying to satisfy our senses. We are completely at loss and unhappy. But the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining this, we're not bewildered anymore. Being so situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. Purport: one can attain Krishna consciousness or divine life at once, within a second, or one may never attain such a state of life even after millions of births. It is only a matter of understanding and accepting the fact. Katvanga Maharaj attained this state of life just a few minutes before his death by surrendering unto Krishna. Nirvana means ending the process of materialistic life. According to Buddhist philosophy, there is only void after the completion of this material life, but Bhagavad Gita teaches differently. Actual life begins after the completion of this material life. For the gross materialist, it is sufficient to know that one has to end this materialistic way of life. But for persons who are spiritually advanced, there is another life after this materialistic life. Before ending this life, if one fortunately becomes Krishna consciousness, one attains the stage of Brahma Nirvana, or Brahma Bhuta, right? There is no difference between the kingdom of God and the devotional service of the Lord, since both of them are on the absolute plane. To be engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord is to have attained the spiritual kingdom. In the material world, there are activities of sense gratification, whereas in the spiritual world, there are activities of Krishna consciousness. So everything is a perverted reflection. There are activities in the material world, but they're perverted reflections of Krishna consciousness, which is what every living Jivatma is engaging in the spiritual world. Attainment of Krishna consciousness, even during this life, is immediate attainment of Brahman. and one who is situated in Krishna consciousness has certainly already entered into the kingdom of God. Brahman is just the opposite of matter. Therefore, Brahmasthitihi means not on the platform of material activities. Devotional service of the Lord is accepted in the Bhagavad Gita as the liberated stage. Therefore, Brahmasthitihi is liberation from material bondage. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as being the contents for the whole text. Truly. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matters are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has also been given as the contents of the complete text. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of its contents. Krishna, wonderful. Such a great verse. I love that. God, it makes me so happy. So we are going to go next time into chapter 3. We will do a read-through like we did with chapter 2, just all the way through. It's entitled Karma Yoga, and so what has been sort of like touched upon in chapter 2 about Karma Yoga and sort of foreshadowed, we're going to get into a little bit more with this chapter. Definitely, it's really wonderful. So thank you very much, and Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada, Hari Bol.